My name is Marcus. Or, it was. Now, I'm just, me. I was on my way to the grocery store, just a regular Tuesday in downtown Chicago. I remember thinking about what kind of cereal I wanted. Then I saw it. A woman, normally all put together, was just, gnawing on someone's arm. Right there on the sidewalk. People were screaming, not in shock, but in pure, animalistic terror. They were running, but not away from the attacker. They were running into the chaos. I saw a man, normal suit and tie, trip and get swallowed by a mob. Their faces, they weren't angry or sad. They were just, empty. Hungry. And the noise. A guttural, wet sound that still stuck in my head. It was like a symphony of the damned. I ducked into an alleyway, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The smell hit me then, coppery and sickly sweet. I peeked around the corner, and saw a kid, maybe 10 years old, stumbling towards a fallen woman. He lunged, his small hands tearing into her. It wasn't rage, it was instinct. A primal urge I'd never imagined. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a riot. This was, something else. Something that turned people into monsters. My first thought was my apartment. My sister, Sarah. I had to get to her. The streets were a nightmare. Cars crashed everywhere, doors hanging open like broken jaws. Bodies littered the pavement, some still twitching, others already being fed upon. I had to fight the urge to vomit with every step. I saw a cop, gun drawn, trying to hold back a wave of these things. Then one of them got him. The way he went down, the way his own humanity vanished in seconds, it was like watching a film, but the blood was real, the screams were real. My mind was racing, trying to process this. How? Why? None of it mattered. Survival did. I needed to get to Sarah, and I needed to do it without becoming one of them. I managed to get to my building, but the lobby was a mess. The doorman was changed. His eyes were glazed over, his skin pallid. He lunged at me when I tried to get past him. I didn't want to hurt him, but I had no choice. I pushed him away, hard, and ran for the stairs. The elevator was out. Every floor was a gamble. I heard sounds, groans, scrapes, from behind closed doors. Was Sarah okay? Was she even still in there? The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my gut that tightened with every floor I climbed. I reached my apartment door, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. What if she's already, no. I couldn't think about that. But what if she is? What do you do then? What would you do if you found someone you loved, but they weren't them anymore? I finally got the door open. Silence. The apartment was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the mayhem outside. I called her name, my voice a raw whisper. No answer. I searched every room, my hope dwindling with each empty space. Then I saw it. A note on the kitchen counter. Marcus, I heard the sirens. I'm going to the old fort. Hope you're okay. Love, Sarah. The old fort. Miles away. And she went alone. My heart sank, but a flicker of hope ignited. She was alive. She was smart. But the fort, it's not exactly a fortress. And this is spreading. It's not stopping. If you're hearing this, if this recording somehow gets out, please, help us. Please. And if you can, just, remember us. Remember what it was like before. This is Marcus, signing off. If there's a tomorrow for me, you'll know. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more of my story, and hit that like button if you're feeling this. It might be the last thing I can do. The silence that followed Marcus's final words was heavier than anything Clara had experienced in the fort. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a suffocating presence, the kind that makes you feel watched, even when you know you're alone. She clutched the tablet, its cracked screen a beacon of fading hope in the dim light. Marcus was gone, that much was clear. His last message, a desperate plea and a morbid sign-off, echoed in her mind. She replayed the last few seconds, searching for anything, any hint of what happened to him, but it was just static in that final, chilling exhale. Clara knew she had to do something. Staying put felt like waiting for the inevitable. The fort, as Marcus had called it, was more of a crumbling shell. The barricades they'd hastily reinforced were already showing signs of stress, splintered wood groaning under an unseen pressure. The rhythmic thudding, which had been a constant, terrifying soundtrack since the early hours, was getting closer. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a vibration that traveled through the dirt floor and up her boots. She decided to move. The back exit, a narrow, rusted metal door that led out into what used to be a courtyard, was her only option. Every creak of her movements, every rustle of her worn clothes, felt amplified. She held her breath, listening. The thudding had stopped directly outside the fort's main entrance, replaced by a low, guttural moaning that sent shivers down her spine. It sounded like 1,000 throats trying to speak at once, each one strained and broken. Peeking through a gap in the boarded-up window, Clara saw them. They weren't fast, not in the way she'd imagined. They shambled, dragged their feet, but there were so many. A tide of them, a grotesque mosaic of decay and unnatural hunger. Their eyes, where they still existed, were milky and vacant, yet somehow locked onto the fort, onto the sounds of life within. One of them, a hulking figure in what looked like a tattered security uniform, was clawing at the main gate, its fingernails scraping against the metal with a sound that made Clara's teeth ache. She turned, her heart pounding against her ribs. The back door. It was her only chance. She fumbled with the rusted latch, her hands slick with sweat. It resisted at first, stuck fast by years of neglect. Panic started to set in, a cold dread creeping into her gut. The moaning outside the main gate intensified, punctuated by the sickening sound of splintering wood. They were getting in. With a final, desperate yank, the latch gave way with a screech that was far too loud. Clara shoved the door open just enough to slip through. The air outside was cold and damp, carrying the stench of rot and something else, something metallic and foul. She found herself in a narrow alleyway, choked with debris and shadows. The sounds from the fort were muffled now, but the groans and the thudding were still discernible, a constant reminder of what she was running from. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from the fort, away from the encroaching darkness. The alley opened into a wider street, eerily silent. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, distorted shadows that played tricks on her eyes. She moved cautiously, her senses on high alert, expecting something to emerge from every doorway, every darkened alcove. The silence was almost worse than the noise. It felt pregnant with unseen threats, the calm before a storm she couldn't predict. A sudden movement at the edge of her vision made her freeze. A figure detached itself from the deeper shadows across the street, its gait unnatural, jerky. Then another. And another. They were slowly, inexorably, moving towards her. She didn't wait to see what they were. Her legs, fueled by pure instinct, carried her away from the approaching figures. She darted down a narrow alleyway, the stench of refuse stinging her nostrils. The uneven cobblestones threatened to trip her with every step, but fear gave her a strange kind of agility. Behind her, she could hear the shuffling, scraping sounds of the figures pursuing her, a relentless, unnerving chorus. The alley twisted and turned, a labyrinth designed to disorient. She risked a glance back. They were still coming, their forms indistinct in the gloom, but their sheer number was growing. It was like a tide of shadows, pulling her in. She burst out of the alley into a wider, though still deserted, street. Panic clawed at her throat. Where could she go? Every street looked the same, a grid of oppressive stone and silence. She could hear them closing in. The shuffling had a rhythm now, a terrifying, synchronized advance. She spotted a sturdy-looking wooden door set into a building on her right. Without a second thought, she lunged for it, fumbling with the handle. Locked. Despair washed over her for a fleeting moment before a flicker of resolve returned. She scanned the wall beside the door, her eyes catching on a small, barred window. It was high, but maybe. She braced herself, drawing on a reserve of strength she didn't know she possessed. She jumped, her fingers scrabbling at the rough stone of the wall, seeking purchase. Her feet kicked against the solid brick, propelling her upwards. She managed to hook her fingers through the bars, her knuckles scraping raw. With a grunt, she hauled herself up, her body contorting to squeeze through the narrow opening. She tumbled onto a dusty floor, the sound of her landing muffled by the thick layer of neglect. She scrambled to her feet, looking around. It was some kind of storage room, filled with old crates and barrels, smelling of damp earth and something vaguely sweet. She pushed herself away from the window, breathing heavily, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then she heard it again. The shuffling, the scraping. They were at the window. Silhouettes pressed against the bars, their blank faces turned towards her. They were trying the window, rattling the frame, but it held. For now. She backed away, deeper into the shadows of the room, looking for another way out. There had to be one. She couldn't stay here. She found a small door at the back of the room, half hidden behind a stack of crates. It was unlocked. She slipped through it, finding herself in a dimly lit corridor. The sounds from the other side of the barred window faded, but the oppressive silence of the building returned, more chilling than before. She continued onward, moving with renewed urgency, the hunt far from over. Okay, so picture this, it's Mark. Just a regular guy, working at a diner in what used to be a quiet little town. One Tuesday, it all went to hell. He was wiping down tables, humming a tune, when the screams started. Not just a few, but a chorus of pure terror echoing from the street. He looked out the window, expecting a car crash, maybe a brawl. What he saw, man, that's not something you forget. People were wrong. Their skin was gray, peeling, their eyes vacant and milky, yet their mouths were contorted in a perpetual, hungry snarl. And they weren't just shambling, they were lurching, tearing into anyone who crossed their path. Mark watched, frozen, as a woman he'd served breakfast to just that morning, Mrs. Gable, ripped into the throat of her own husband. It was a bloody, guttural mess, and the sounds, gods, the sounds. He heard the wet tearing of flesh, the sickening crunch of bone, and then a low, inhuman moan as the husband, too, started to change. His eyes rolled back, a guttural gurgle escaped his lips, and his jaw unhinged, reaching for anything that moved. Mark stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The noise drew attention. A few of the shambling figures outside turned their vacant gazes towards the diner. Their heads swiveled with an unnatural jerk, and then they started for the door. Mark didn't think. He bolted. He scrambled out the back, the diner's kitchen a blur of greasy pans and half-prepped food. The door slammed shut behind him, but he could already hear them pounding, splintering the wood. He ran through alleys, the stench of decay and something metallic thick in the air. He saw more. A father, his own child clutched in his arms, gnawing on the toddler's small, lifeless form. A group of what looked like businessmen, their expensive suits torn and stained, feasting on a fallen police officer. It wasn't just an infection, it was a perversion of humanity, turning people into monstrous parodies of themselves, driven by a primal, unthinking hunger. The sheer, raw violence of it, the complete obliteration of everything he'd ever understood about life, started to chip away at his sanity. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a loneliness so profound it was like a physical weight. Who could he trust? Who was still human? Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every groan a prelude to his own demise. He found himself scanning faces, looking for the telltale vacant stare, the unnatural gait, the hunger. He realized with a sickening certainty that the greatest danger wasn't the creatures themselves, but the fear they instilled, the paranoia that could make a survivor just as dangerous as the infected. He needed to get out of town, find somewhere, anywhere, safer. But even as he ran, the gnawing question echoed in his mind, was there even anywhere safe anymore? He burst through the fire escape, the metal groaning under his weight, and scrambled down into the alley. Trash cans lay overturned, their contents strewn across the cracked pavement. A rat, fat and bold, scurried away into the shadows. The air hung thick with the stench of decay and something metallic, something that made his stomach churn. He didn't stop, didn't look back. Every creak of a shutter, every distant cry, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He kept his eyes fixed on the street ahead, a desolate avenue of abandoned cars and shuttered storefronts. The silence was worse than any noise, a heavy blanket that pressed down on him, amplifying every rustle of his own clothes, every beat of his frantic heart. He rounded a corner, and the sight made him freeze. A lone figure stood in the middle of the street, silhouetted against the pale moonlight. It was swaying, just slightly, a macabre dance in the emptiness. As he watched, the figure turned its head, a slow, unnatural movement. He couldn't make out its features in the gloom, but the stillness, the lack of any recognizable human reaction, sent a fresh wave of dread washing over him. He ducked back behind a dumpster, his breath catching in his throat. He had to move, had to keep going, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The creature hadn't seen him, not yet, but the sheer proximity was terrifying. He waited, muscles tensed, listening. The swaying stopped. The figure remained utterly motionless. It was as if it was waiting too, listening for him, for any sign of life in this dead city. He could feel its presence, a palpable aura of wrongness. Slowly, painstakingly, he eased himself around the dumpster, his eyes still locked on the street. The figure was still there, a sentinel of despair. He knew he couldn't outrun it if it noticed him. Not in the open. He needed cover, another route, anything to break line of sight. His gaze flickered to a narrow gap between two buildings, a dark passage that might lead to more alleys, more hiding places. It was a gamble. The passage could lead to a dead end, or worse, directly into the path of something else. But staying put was a death sentence. He took a deep breath, a shallow, shaky thing, and sprinted towards the gap. He squeezed between the brick walls, the rough surfaces scraping his arms. The darkness was absolute, the air even colder and more stagnant than outside. He fumbled for the small flashlight in his pocket, his fingers clumsy with fear. The beam cut through the blackness, revealing a narrow corridor, littered with debris. And at the far end, another figure, slowly shuffling towards him. He stumbled forward, the flashlight beam bobbing wildly. The shuffling figure solidified into a woman, her face gaunt and her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. She wore rags that barely clung to her skeletal frame, and her hands, claw-like, reached out towards him. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Was this another of them? Or was she trapped too? Her lips moved, but no sound came out, only a dry, rasping whisper. He held the flashlight steady, trying to make out more. Her gaze flickered past him, towards the narrow opening he'd just come through. A flicker of something, hope, ignited within him. He gestured frantically towards the opening, mouthing, "Go. Go." She didn't understand, or perhaps she was too weak to react. He took a step towards her, then another, the debris crunching under his worn boots. The shuffling sound behind him grew louder, closer. He risked a glance back. 3 of them now, shambling figures with vacant stares and unnerving stillness in their movements, were emerging from the darkness. They weren't fast, but they were relentless. He turned back to the woman. He had to get her out. He grabbed her arm, surprised by how light she was. Her skin felt like parchment stretched over bone. He pulled, urging her towards the opening. She resisted slightly, her eyes still fixed on the approaching figures. He grunted, pulling harder. She swayed, taking a hesitant step. Together, they shuffled back towards the gap in the wall. The flashlight beam, now in his other hand, illuminated their path, catching the glint of something in the dust at their feet, a tarnished silver locket. He had no time to think. He pushed the woman towards the opening, her tattered clothes snagging on the rough brick. She stumbled through, her moans audible. He followed, squeezing through the tight space, the scraping of brick against his back a familiar, painful sensation. He was out, back in the relative openness of the alley, but the shuffling sounds were still echoing from within. He turned, shining the flashlight back into the darkness. The woman was a few feet away, still dazed, but moving. And the figures were still there, at the edge of the light, their forms indistinct, their purpose unknown. He grabbed the woman's hand again. "We have to go," he urged, his voice raspy. She nodded, her eyes finally focusing on him. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the deserted streets. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to put as much distance as possible between them and that place. The locket had fallen from his pocket during their escape. He stopped, panting, and looked back. The darkness was absolute again. He couldn't see anything. He didn't dare go back. They just kept running, into the uncertain dawn. Thank you for joining us on this journey. As we leave our survivors to face the dawning uncertainty, remember that preparedness is not just about reacting, but about anticipating. Even in the most dire of circumstances, a simple skill, like knowing how to purify water using readily available materials, could be the difference between life and death. Imagine finding a clear stream, but being unable to drink from it because of unseen contaminants. Understanding basic filtration and boiling methods ensures that even a life-sustaining resource can become a source of illness if handled improperly. Always have a way to make your water safe. Our tale of relentless pursuit and narrow escapes highlighted the fragility of our modern conveniences and the primal instinct to survive. The desperation in his voice as he urged them forward, the shared terror in her eyes, and the silent, crushing weight of what was lost, the locket, a tangible piece of their past, left behind in the chaos, these moments underscore the profound human connection that can blossom even amidst utter devastation. They are a testament to the will to protect what matters most, even when faced with overwhelming odds and the complete breakdown of societal order. Their flight into the unknown dawn was not just a physical escape, but a desperate leap towards a future, however bleak. In the face of unimaginable horror, the ability to maintain composure is paramount. Panic is a swift and unforgiving enemy, clouding judgment and leading to fatal errors. When fear threatens to consume you, take a moment. Breathe. Focus on the immediate, actionable steps. Even a single moment of collected thought can redirect an entire situation. Whether it's a subtle shift in strategy during an intense pursuit or a calm assessment of dwindling resources, a clear mind is your most potent weapon. We hope these stories have resonated with you, reminding you of the importance of both physical and mental fortitude. The world can change in an instant, and being ready is not about succumbing to fear, but about empowering yourself with knowledge and resilience. If you found value in this narrative and wish to explore more survival strategies and gripping tales of perseverance, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your engagement fuels our passion to create content that informs and inspires. Don't forget to leave a comment below, we'd love to hear your thoughts and any survival tips you might have. Until next time, stay prepared, stay vigilant, and stay calm.